Hello, and welcome to a rather hard topic. Today I'd like to speak about the current development in our culture. And I'd like to ask you whether you have wondered why there's so much hate speech, so much loneliness, so much segregation, so much group thinking, so much political ideologies which separate the human being and make it more and more egoistic and lonely, especially in the big cities, which are becoming more and more the same or very similar in the so-called developed world. Prejudice and group ideologies are continuously on the rise, and what I'm missing is what we usually seek in friendships, is the warm and trustworthy society, the humanism which we seek in friendships, and which is, by the way, part of the European hymn, Freude schöner Götterfunken. It said that whoever has found a friend may come into the circle of joy. And the so-called friendships, if you think about Facebook, and there are all these hyper-social or pseudo-social platforms, what they call friends is mere a acquaintanceship or something, but it's not friendship in its real sense. So today I would like to focus on how we became such a cold and arid society, and also reflect on the culture, on the art and the architecture, and the influence on the coming generations upon which we should have a look to. Like Janus, we should look into the future, but also back, since we've become old. So speaking for my generation, I'm in the mid-30s or end of 30s. So we are more or less now at the decision-making tables in the society, and our generation, although it's so adopted to the conservative values, has few new impulses for upcoming future generations. But let's begin. What is a generation? The very newborn human child comes to this world and has no concepts of anything. It soaks up from the whole culture, the gestures, the language, the art, the stories, the behavior, the dress code, the beliefs, and the whole culture. It's just soaking up, and is not able to reflect until we become maybe in the 20s or in the beginning of the 20s, we might be post-adolescent and reflect upon how we have been raised. But at first, we all simply just soak up. And this is also the distinction between human and animals, simply expressed in one word. It's called education. I mean, you can raise an animal and you can teach them certain behavior, but if you're a dog or cat lover, you won't get ever to education. They will follow your orders maybe, but the education of a human being is something completely different, and you can picture this by thinking about all the feral children which we know in history, which were raised by wolves or by other animals, and they adopted their behavior. They later in life couldn't even learn speech, talk, language, and they were moving like animals. And so these are the so-called feral children. Or in Germany we have this example of Kaspar Hauser, a very well-dressed young man who wasn't able to speak because he was simply raised in a cave, or it was very little known how he was raised, but he barely got education at all. So we are all raised and we all soak up everything by our culture. And no matter how clever you are, how ingenious, how creative, you owe a great deal to your culture, to your parents, to your friends, to your foes, to your teachers, to everything what came from the society, from the culture. And it's simply comparable like a plant which owes a great deal to the solid ground, to the moisture, to the sunlight, to the wind, air, to the minerals, to the soil itself, right? And we owe a great deal to our culture, and this is of course why we are thankful and why we can appreciate the culture in which we've been raised, or the beliefs, the stories, the language, the dress codes, simply also the architecture, all what culture contains. But it's about the age of the beginning 20s, or let's say mid-20s, when we become free and we are able to reflect back where we have been raised, in what kind of culture. This is also the time when usually the fertility is the highest in female, and so in the mid-20s. So it's been said that a generation counts 25 years, X generation X, Y, and Z. So everything is counted within this range of 20 till 25 years. And this is about this age when people become really free in order to reflect back. You certainly in the 30s you will have another progress, but it's about this age, the beginning of 20s, the post-adolescence, when you got mostly free of your hormonal stimuli and society experiences, and also the time when you might become able to stand on firm ground by your own, economically speaking, that you can take care pay your bills and stuff which is necessary in the current society. So we could say that nature develops us till the beginning of 20s, and then we ourselves become free to take part in this cultural development. We add towards it. We also neglect certain things. Usually this is the case, what we see in the culture as a whole, that what they take as worthy value, for example Shakespeare or Goethe or Hafez or Cervantes, or they carry this on through the generations because they see the value and the truth inside these masterpieces, and simply what's dirt and what's not worthy usually falls out and won't be discussed in 100 years or 200 years afterwards. But sometimes it's digged out, and then there are certain parts, certain things in culture who have been forgotten, and then they see the value again. But let's say it's like a filter for the culture, acts like a filter for the great values and for the dirt. And I wonder what the future generations in 100 or 200 years will say about our art and current culture. I think there won't be too much which they carry on. But let's see. So what I was saying about the fertility and about the blossoming of the human being in the mid-20s is really biologically speaking. In the beginning of your 30s, you already start to decline, strictly biologically speaking. Your hormones already lessen to a little bit. So men have lower testosterone, and females will also have less hormones. So it's really the blossoming, the biologically speaking blossoming is in the 25, mid-20s of a human being. But since human being can become 30 or even 3 times 30, 90 years, we need to consider that there can be several blossomings, which won't be biologically, but be maybe cultural or psychological or spiritual, or there are other blossomings too in the human, because we aren't after all only biological beings. And now I wanted to take a step back and reflect upon our culture, what our current culture has to give the future generations. So take a look at the music, take a look at the films, and you might ask yourself, are there new impulses, or is it more or less a recycling of the old, sequels and prequels? Something was successful in the past and now we make a prequel and sequel about it? Or are there new, fresh impulses which really show progress in art or in humanity itself? Or does it merely feel like that art is influenced by politics and agendas and nepotism, and maybe sound more or less the same, like a copy of a copy, very exchangeable? Or are there really fresh impulses? Ask this yourself as honestly as you can. You might have your views upon this, but really ask yourself this and compare, for example, what we have 100 years ago, what kind of cultural blossoming. Also, politics. Our political leaders, a shining symbol of human values. Are they good? Are they truthful? Are they how do they have grace? Do they envelop these human values? Or are they simply technocratic puppets which could be easily exchanged and it would change nothing for the international or national community? Reflect upon this. For me, it feels very much that our political system, I'm using this machine metaphor, has become a faceless machine which only needs placeholders. Some years ago we really had enthusiastic, creative human beings which had new impulses. Just reflect upon the fall of the Soviet Union. There was a very idealistic human being who said that we should get rid of atomic weapons, and that we should reconstruct socialism. And so people really had an influence at this time. And also think about the educational system, which has to take in third-party money in order to finance themselves. Usually there's a sentence in the Grundgesetz in Germany, or in the Verfassung, how is it called? What they written down to make a republic here in Austria. There's a paragraph which says that the education should be free. Is education free after all if they are obliged to have third-party funding? Sounds like a rhetorical question, and it is. I also noticed that the curriculum has become more and more rigid. Right now we have bachelor and master students instead of the more open and free magister curriculum, where you could choose more or less where you're interested in. And now it feels much more that there are certain kind of people are produced for the machinery of capitalism, and this has been done by dividing the education, degrees in bachelors and masters. So bachelors are more or less, you can pay them half, and they are half academics. And okay, if you invest a little bit more, but do it quickly. Usually you have less time than in former times to study, and it's again more rigid, right? What you can study feels more or less like a school system nowadays. They say, okay, you can choose here and there a little bit, but this is it. This is really essentials, and you need to learn this, and then rather quickly. I mean, the stuff which is necessary for business, right? I'm pretty much in this field too, but we will go deeper into this later on. Next to this, I also see a very hastening progress in our society. Do it quickly, do it more efficiently. Digitalization plays a very big role. Social distancing as well. I always wondered, why is it called social distancing instead of physical distancing? I mean, I won't go deep into this, but after all, for me, it tells a lot. Also, the whole globalization, you might ask yourself, what is being globalized? Are human values being globalized? Is freedom globalized? Or is it simply the business which is globalized? Yeah. And why is there so much focus on efficiency, on economical growth, and why is competition so over-exaggerated? It's today I see behind all money figures and graphs, and everything is pretty much focused on the business. I mean, business is an essential part in human life, but it's very over-exaggerated nowadays. Also, take a look at the ice cubic buildings which you have nowadays. They are very efficient, right? Aren't they? On minimum space, you build a house very cubic to maximize the space, or for living units, and to draw out most of the money. And now take a look back 100 years ago, where they had Art Deco or Art Nouveau, where they made big apartments and where they put human faces on the outside, or human figurines and natural forms, and not these cold and arid forms which we have nowadays. Very edgy, very cold, very hard. And since architecture speaks to humans, right? Here we have this is I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and see how much emphasis the old Egyptians or Chaldeans put on the human beings. Again, today very much focus is put on digitalization and efficiency and economical values. Okay, so in this light, I mentioned the education system, I mentioned the architecture, I mentioned the art, so music, films, and now we will focus a little bit more on the advertisement, and you can also think about technology, which goes hand in hand with this economical over-exaggeration. We have smartphones nowadays everywhere. We have tracking apps, we have cookies, we have mass media, we have a lot of advertisement, we have hyper social media worldwide. Again, this is also being globalized. We have speech recognition programs, we have computer vision, we have statistical machine learning, functional analysis of human behavior, again something which I also dived into in my study field, for the European Union, of course, for the best values which we can possibly think of, not economical values, of course not. And this all goes along with the alignment of policies worldwide. In the beginning I mentioned that all the big cities are becoming more and less the same, or again they look very similar. All the big companies and brands can be seen no matter which capital you go, you will find them. Yeah, think about, I know I won't name anything, otherwise someone will say I do the advertisement here. So all these trends, right? All these trends, which I summarized now, paving the way to increasingly cold and machine-like culture, and which will suffocate the future generations and the human creativity, because it will force more standardization, more hastening, more economical values upon the humans. And I cannot help but to see a technocratic usurping progress, which is going hand in hand with this all-favorite mammon. Now I said mammon. Mammon is a term which is understood as the idol of money. And since the financial crisis, the idol of money has become even more powerful, because it made it threw the national states into debts. And the debt crisis will be an increasing problem in the future, I think. And therefore all the national states have lost their power compared to the banks and financial elite. Like, for example, the Bank of International the BIS, or the International Monetary Fund, which are the World Bank, we could say, and the economical sphere has become the most influential in our culture. No wonder why all the young people want to study business. This is a very open study and teaches you all the ideology which you need to know in order to push the financial markets, not necessarily the real economy, but mostly the financial markets, which have become much bigger than the real economy. Think about this too. All the money which is going around in circulation is is so big that you could buy all the goods which are here on Earth, right? I wonder whether we ever come to a time when a national state is so much in debt, like Japan or Italy, and a financial investor comes along and says, "Oh, I would like to buy now Rome or Tokyo," or right? If we ever let this be, yeah, if this economical sphere overpowers the public life in such a way. But let's see. What I would like to share with you is something which was written 500 years ago by a very simple guy, a shoemaker in Germany called Jakob Böhme. And I have a translation here, because my English is not so good. I will try to read it still. The world may well think that it is now in prosperity because it has the shining light hovering above it. Right? This could be said about our times too. We say we are so progressive and the technological progress is so good that we nearly forget who's behind this. After all, weren't these people who make this possible? The growth, the financial growth, aren't these people who are pushed more and more to make to bring more value? Please don't forget this. Okay. Again, the world well think it is now in prosperity because it has the bright light hovering over it. But the Spirit shows me that it is in the midst of hell. Hell. For she, the world, has forsaken love and has clung to avarice, usury, and covetousness. There is no mercy in her. Everyone cries out, "If I only had money!" The mighty sucks the marrow out of the legs of the lowly and takes his sweat by force. Oof. What a good description of our times, made 500 years ago. So it's still the way that we are exploited, right? The money is much above the human being nowadays. And this can easily be grasped by all the GDP figures which you see, all these political phrases and buzzwords about the economy, all the talk about the importance of the financial markets, but no one sees the human being behind this, right? Who built everything and who made this possible. Yes, and it's and who's there in order to satisfy this growth ideology. So the exploitation of ourselves, if you are not a capitalist, is obvious every day, and it's becoming more and more increasing. People get really crushed like biscuit crumbs, to quote a popular song. They are really humiliated and degraded, and their labor power is really an expression of their individuality. But it is a remnant of serfdom. We usually forget that human creativity is million times exploited by abstract entities called corporations who have managed to become juristical persons, Can you imagine? They claim that they are themselves a human being, although they are a very abstract human being, which is not really living, but is living from the sacrifices of the human beings, creatives' labor every day. And those corporations have managed to become, in juristical terms speaking, a person. Thereby them clothing themselves like a human, and the life force is given, again, by the humans, and it's sacrificed for the sake of money. So the world has fallen under the illusion that everything can be measured in money, right? And now we need to. I would like to quote something from the people who have been, how to put it. There has been a genocide 200 years ago, and the chief of the Squamish or Duwamish, I don't know whether I pronounced this right, said that there was a letter written from Washington, from the president, and he asked to buy the land from the native people. And this idea was very strange to him, and he said, the president in Washington sends words that he wishes to buy our land. But how can you buy or sell the sky or the land? The idea is very strange to us. If we don't owe the freshness of the air, the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? So the illusion consists that the ownership is really the right to have to work on this land, right? This is more or less the right, but this right has been turned into a good, and this good then can be sold like every other good. Also, the labor of each human is not a good which is to sell, but the human labor is the part of the creativity of the human being, which even has an effect back on the human who works, right? But we are ought to run after our labor or to sell our labor on the open market, which degrades human being. This is a very simple truth which is not mentioned very often today and could be handled differently. How, you might now ask? Well, this is a matter for another video, but if you don't have an idea upon this, then it's a sign that we are very much indoctrinated and that we don't have new fresh impulses to think about this. Okay, the other illusionary spell are the so-called investors. If you think about investors, they are more or less a creed of people who have money. And the simple relation which they have with the companies is that they give the money. And okay, now you give the money, and what do you expect in return? More money. And therefore they hire managers in between. So, and the idea of the manager is to make more money with the money which has been given. But the real value is done by the people who work every day in their certain jobs to satisfy a human demand, whatever this is. And this is all what economy is for, to satisfy the human demands and not to satisfy financial market demands. But like I mentioned before, the financial markets are much bigger than the real economy. And this might also be the reason why everything will turn very bad in the end. But again, I hope this came clear now, because the relation to the financial economy, to the real economy, is an illusionary. It's just about the money, right? And money is like it's needed for. Okay, now I don't want to go into this. There's a lot of theory about this, but it needs to flow, right? This should be in circulation all the time. But if the sake of money is only to have more money, then there's something wrong, right? And okay, but maybe should go into the debt crisis as well. But I have some points here on the lists. The debt crisis is the same relationship with these investors, because from the World Bank or IMF, they lend money in order to put in certain policies. And so those who have the money lend money and get money in return back, more than they have had to lend because of the interest, right? And it's never said who are really the debtors. I know it's usually corporations, but there are also private people who we never get to know and who could easily end all the misery on the world if they would get rid of this debt. But at least the debt is how the mighty man sucks the marrow of the legs of the lowly and takes their sweat by force. And we have more or less made ourselves comfortable to get sucked our marrow out of our bones and taken our sweat and labor by force, haven't we? Okay, there are several points on the list, but I really wanted to come back and say something what my professor used to tell me. They asked us, what is wrong with your generation? He said he was from the hippie movement, I think. So he was one of those revolutionary generations who had these fresh impulses. And he said, your generation is very conservative. You act much or less like we do. Where are the new fresh impulses, right? Where is these Tolstoy's? Where's the Hafez and Shakespeare's, Martin Luther or Giordano Bruno of your time? Who writes these pieces and who helps to progress society? Today I don't see these impulses. I see more or less a real decline in art, in architecture, in the whole cultural sphere, and more and more an increasing domination of capital and digitalization. And since we human beings define ourselves ever anew from each generation, right? We add something, like I said in the beginning, what's valuable, and we get rid of what's which has no value. And now imagine this trend increasing and what is this doing for the future generations. I think that we are getting dragged down here. I see an increasing technocratic and standardizing and hastening process that is undermining freedom and human beings, our development, our creativity, our free thoughts, and places instead a structural ice crust, and with focus solely on capital, and which is producing machine men, hardened faces, hardened hearts, purely like the Homo economicus, which is said to be a descriptive view on human being in economics, but it becomes much more normative. Becomes much more normative for our society. So we will also see more wars and more conflicts because we do not understand each other. People pass each other by. They don't care, they don't interest themselves for the others. They have their own standpoint and they fight for this standpoint and say we are this group, therefore group ideologies are becoming more and more prevalent, and we're walking into pure egoism this way. If we are not able anymore to understand one another, to take a look, to really listen to the other one, to leave all our sympathy and antipathy behind and to listen and to try to understand the other one, if we don't do this, we will further give fuel to this standardizing, ice-cold machine efficiency, economic, technocratic usurping. We play our part in this, right? And we could burn with the riddle for the human being, right? We don't know until now what is really the human being. There's much been said, and there are so many riddles, and if we would loosen ourselves a little bit from ourselves and try to become the other one, because we do have this power, among other powers which we have, we can try, at least in the mind, and maybe sometimes even in the feelings, become the other one, right? A poet broadens himself in order to make a figure alive, right? He doesn't need to live this life, but he can broaden himself to another person, right? And make it comparable for us too, by writing this down, and give us a look into their soul life, of this fictional person, which really becomes alive during the process of writing. The belief in authorities would be so much obsolete if we could do so. All these empty phrases which we hear in this political talk, all these buzzwords would become obsolete if we really would go to the deep matter, to the deep understanding of one another. I know my wife usually tells me this sounds like a Miss Universe contest, what I'm saying here now, and you might laugh about this, but it's really my deep understanding of the human, that we are very much alike. No matter all the differences in skin color and culture, there's nothing, really nothing, which you cannot become. Just to take a look at your human fellows around, at their faces, you see how they feel. You even, what they talk, you might see what they think, and there's nothing new to it. All what you see out there is within you, and what is within you, you can see outside as well. And behind all these hardened hearts, behind all the suffering, disillusions, and even the bluffing of human being, the human being is in search of the human being, and it cannot find it anymore. This I want to emphasize. For now, there's much more to be said, but the human being defines itself ever anew, and our culture acts upon this. And we try to reach out for one another. All the economies built for one another. All the architectures built by human beings for human beings. We do this for us and for future generations. And all these nationalisms, they are more conglomerated egoism. And all these fights which we are fighting outside, you could internalize them. You could take the enemy inside you. There's also a saying from Shams Trabis, which I've quoted often. He said, the believer should meet the non-believer within himself. We can become one another. We can understand one another, and we are in search for the human being. Goodbye.